Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, where we look at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century. Welcome back. I'm your hostess today, Kristen, and I'm with my co-hosts, Amber and Cindy.
Hello.
Howdy.
Today is World Diabetes Day.
Tomorrow.
Oh, sorry,
It'll be
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. But so the topic this week is World Diabetes Day. We're taking this advantage to talk about diabetes and diabetes awareness. So I'm sure that all of you listeners know someone who has diabetes or had diabetes or is worried about getting diabetes. It's definitely like heart disease, something that we just collectively as human beings have to be careful with to, watch our health and take care of ourselves. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's something you can also get genetically as well.
Yes.
And so we wanted to talk about it. It's near and dear to my heart because you may or may not know, Cindy has diabetes.
Yes.
And so does my husband. His
and
father
your father-in-law.
has, my father-in-law has diabetes, as well as my late aunt. She
Yes.
also had diabetes, and
My late parents had diabetes.
Both of your parents, right?
Both of my parents, yes.
My grandmother also had diabetes, so.
yeah, and so I'm thinking, okay, wow, it runs in my family, obviously, and then in my husband's it must as well,
Right.
And with that, there are two types of diabetes. So today I thought it would be a really good idea, just to talk about the terminology as my husband is, trying to learn how to cope with his diabetes, as you are as well too, Mom, I'm sure. There's a lot to learn about it.
And there's more information all the time because it's changed a lot even since the time when my sister was diagnosed. She was 13 years old in 1980 when she was diagnosed with diabetes, and she was actually diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which they used to call juvenile diabetes because most people developed what they did basically was if you developed it as a child, it was called juvenile diabetes. If you developed it as an adult, they called it adult onset diabetes. And they thought it was kind of the same disease, but we now know that it's different. And children can have type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, and adults can also develop what we used to call juvenile diabetes. But type 1 diabetes is, as I said, generally diagnosed in children. And there's kind of two age groups of children that are, it predominantly shows up in the age group of 4 to 7 years old. And then again from 10 to 14. And my sister was 13, as I mentioned, when she got it. And there's multiple different causes of that kind of diabetes, genetics being one of them. So if someone in your family, has the gene, you could get it. But there's also some potential ties to autoimmune disorders and certain viruses that can cause diabetes. And what it does when in that case, it causes the autoimmune disease causes the body's immune system to attack the islet cells in your pancreas. And those are the cells that create insulin. And when the body attacks those, it kills them off. So the body is no longer able to create insulin to control your food that you consume and to control the sugar in your body. We'll talk more about that later. But that was the kind of diabetes my sister had. And since she had other autoimmune disorders, I'm pretty sure she had either the viral onset or some other way of having the autoimmune disorder diabetes. Now, I have what they call adult onset type 2 diabetes, and that is usually a genetic factor. It has a lot to do with your weight, but it also is in a way an autoimmune disorder, but it's a metabolism disorder. So my body still makes insulin. Whereas in the case of my sister, her body was not making insulin at all. My body still makes insulin, but my body doesn't know how to use it. And so the insulin is just floating around in my blood system with the sugar, and it can't work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the two different kinds. And I believe Travis has the type 2 as well.
Yeah, he's type 2, yes.
When was he diagnosed?
When he was like 20 to 25, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And Terry's is his also type 2 diabetes?
I believe so, yes,
Okay.
but he does do insulin.
He does take insulin.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to be a defining factor also, because they used to believe that the adult onset diabetics did not generally take insulin. They just controlled it with medication and diet. But some of the lesser controlled diabetics actually do take insulin if they can't control it with their diet and medication. So that's those two. You were talking. You had a list of like some terminology and stuff. I think that you wanted to.
Yeah, I think probably the most important one is A1C. I think that's, it's a test that measures your average blood glucose, which is your blood sugar.
Right.
So the sugars are in your blood.
Right. So let's start with how your body works, how food.
Right. Oh yeah. Let's break it down.
Let's break it down to even more basic, because a lot of people don't know this.
Right.
So when you eat food, the foods in your body are converted into sugar by your liver, and everything that you eat is basically turned into sugar. Even your proteins, sugar is the fuel that your body uses. That's what it burns to create energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so your food is broken. It's broken down, and it either becomes sugar that floats around in your blood and then nurtures your cells, or your liver stores it
as fat.
Mm-hmm. And I believe it's glycogen is the type of fat that they that the liver stores in your body. And then the liver, if you're hungry and you haven't eaten, your body can go back to those stores of fat and turn it back into sugar to feed your body. Now, what happens when that sugar is in your body, when you eat, your brain sends your body a signal via some hormones that tell your body to release insulin. And so the insulin comes from your pancreas. We talked about those islet cells.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the cells that create insulin. And the insulin comes into your bloodstream and takes that sugar, and that's how the sugar passes into the cells to feed the cells. But if you have type 1 diabetes, as I mentioned, you won't have enough insulin, or you may have no insulin because it's been your pancreas has been damaged. And so there's no way to get that fuel into your cells. So the sugar just circulates in your body. If you have type 2 diabetes, you still have the insulin, but the body won't let the insulin into your cells. For some reason, your cells reject the insulin and won't let it feed the cells. So the sugar is still just circulating into your body. Now, when you think about the sugars in your body, we'll talk about why that's a bad thing later. But you just think about that sugar is just circulating in your body, right? And so that A1C test is a test of what that average sugar is over time. And I want to say it's like over 3 months or a month or something like that. So somehow they're able to average that out and see what that average sugar is and know whether you have a problem based on what that number is in that test.
For A1C.
Right.
Right. And so that number is
You want to be below 6, I believe.
healthy A1C.
A healthy A1C is below 6. From 6 to 7 is the light risk of diabetes, I believe. And sometimes they call it borderline. It depends.
So normal A1C is below 5.7.
Oh, okay.
Pre-diabetes is 5.7 to 6.4.
Okay.
Diabetes is considered 6.5 or higher.
Or higher, yes. And you really want to keep it down low. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So if it's over 7, it's considered out of control.
Yes.
If it's under 7, then it's, even though it's diabetes, it's within control. It's controlled diabetes.
Right. But if it's below 7. But you want to try to get it below 6 if you can. That's correct. That's ideal because then it begins to go away. And that's the thing. Okay, so they don't know exactly in each person. They know some causes of diabetes, but they don't know exactly what causes it. So there is no prevention except for good diet and exercise and good health. Mm-hmm. And once you have it, particularly like type 1 diabetes, it cannot be cured. Once you have type 1 diabetes, you have that forever. Type 2 diabetes can be controlled, and in some cases, it can be reversed.
Right.
So, but it takes a lot of self-discipline to do that. So,
so interestingly enough, when you think about like diabetes, if you're worried about being at risk, most people, I believe, think about like, oh, I need to lay off the sugar and the cakes.
Right. And the cakes and cookies
right.
and pie and
but
candy.
It's not always just the carbohydrates and the sugary sweets. So I have triglyceridemia, which is where my triglyceride levels are high, which is a type of fat in your blood.
Right.
Like your cholesterol, right? So triglycerides actually
are caused the high triglycerides.
The high triglycerides are caused by fats and sugars.
Fats and sugars, yes.
Both.
Yes.
Becoming problematic. And
right.
so they actually damage the pancreas, which causes diabetes and pancreatitis. So when I went and got, like my blood levels checked, when I was getting like my wellness check, that was the big thing with my doctor, was that I would have to combat that to defend myself from getting diabetes.
And you are at higher risk because I have diabetes and your aunt had diabetes. So,
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the diet to help that, she gave me 2 options. She said, well, we could work with a change in your diet, or you could go for the medicine. And of course, if the change in the diet didn't work, then the alternative option would have to be medicine at that point. And so I said, you know what, I'll try with the diet. Let's see what happens, And it was actually, it was a lower carb diet, but it also was lower in saturated fats too. So taking out the fried foods and bacon and a lot of red meats that had high fat and processed meats. So even things like deli meat and things that have nitrates in them cause that as well. And so it's scary to think, like, here I was over here thinking that,
because you're not eating sugars and pies and
eating my sliced turkey sandwich, or even a sliced turkey not on bread, was actually also causing the same thing that the bread could do, because I was eating, I used to work in a deli. I used to eat processed meat every day for dinner. I got off work and I had my deli sandwich,
Yeah.
And that was kind of terrifying to think about. Like, wow, I was giving myself diabetes and I was actually trying to avoid it.
Right. Right.
So, one of the other terms that, speaking of food and nutrients, is the glycemic index.
Right.
So, when you're talking about like your A1C, that's your levels in your body. Glycemic index is your food's sugar. It's like a measure of.
It's an index, so it's basically the comparison of the amount of carbohydrates in something balanced with the fiber content, and it's basically looking at how long it takes your body to process that food and turn it into sugar in your body. So ideally what you want are things that are high in fiber, because they take longer to dissolve in your body to become sugar. So all carbohydrates turn into sugar. And I think I mentioned this early in the podcast. All food that you eat turns into sugar. Everything. So, but carbohydrates are a form of sugar. And so they get broken down. They become sugar. But the more fiber they have, the slower it takes them, the longer it takes them to break down into sugar. Also, considering protein, the more protein that is paired with them, the longer it takes your body to break them down into sugar. So the glycemic index of foods is based on how long it takes and how much sugar it creates.
So when it comes to carbohydrates and sugar, there's simple sugars and then there's complex or carbohydrates. So when you think about something that's simple, is going to be
fruit. So it's straight up sugar.
Yeah, from the earth. And then the complex ones are going to be things like bread. So when you look at like the glycemic index and like what foods are healthy and like what choices you might want to make, you can consider, is this food high or low on the glycemic index? And that, I think, is a really good place to start when it comes to making smart choices.
Yes.
So foods are ranged on the glycemic index from a number of 0 to 10. 0 to 100. And so with 100 being, the highest on the glycemic index. So when you think about a serving of white bread is considered a 100.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Because that's literally the worst thing that you can eat as far as, glycemic.
The
high
carbs
glycemic.
just break down into sugar.
Do you know what is the lowest foods that have 0?
Celery?
Avocado.
Neither of those. Chicken, beef, fish, and eggs.
Oh, pork. Or protein.
Yes.
Not pork. Protein. Yes.
Protein. Yes.
Protein. Yes.
So straight up protein.
Right.
So, but then when you think of like deep fried chicken, it has flour on the outside. So it is higher on the glycemic index because it has carbs
attached to it. Yeah.
Right? So other high glycemic index foods that you might not think about because like I said, we automatically go straight to chocolate cake and candy bars.
But
right?
But it's not just those. It's starchy foods as well.
Processed foods, corn chips and pretzels. Beverages.
Yeah, anything processed is bad for you.
Sweet tea, sport drinks, sodas.
Right.
When you think about having a sandwich or a hamburger or pizza, those are all high on the glycemic index. And then, of course, cereal and pasta, even potatoes.
Right.
Mashed potatoes and French fries.
Oh, yeah. Potatoes.
Because the starches break down into sugars. Yes.
So when you look at the list, I really like to look at it kind of like in like the food groups, like you have like meats, right? And then you've got your vegetables, because they do have a glycemic index. And then you have even dairy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other beverages.
Right. Even dairy has sugar in it.
Yes. And then your fruit. So when you compare vegetables to fruit is going to have a higher glycemic index because
Yes.
it's sweeter, right? That's
But
why.
but that doesn't mean that you can't eat it.
No. You just have to have portion controls.
Right.
So, when you look at like vegetables,
Vegetables have lower glycemic index because they have
So-
less sugar and more fiber.
and some of the things listed on here that are low glycemic are not things that you would just take a big old bite of. Like ginger is very low; it's only 15,
right.
right? It's a plant, so it has to have some carbohydrates, but you wouldn't just eat a bite of it. A really good one,
Unless it's pickled and you're eating it with your sushi.
right? Exactly, right.
But that has sugar in it.
sugar in it. So see, you have to be careful, right?
Yeah. People don't think about
cucumbers have 15.
that. Okay.
Okay, so you can eat like a ton of cucumber.
Right.
Yeah, it's like
Very
one
low.
of the
And there's a
lowest
lot
ones.
of fiber there.
Nutrient
so, yeah.
dense.
Cucumber and spinach, like
Oh,
those
yeah.
are like two of the
Mhm.
lowest.
Leafy greens and yes,
Kale.
So, right. So when you're looking at the avoid and focus areas of a diet, a healthy diet for someone who's trying to avoid or maintain diabetes
Mm-hmm.
would be high protein and high vegetable.
Yes. Low fat.
And medium dairy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
just
and
not eliminating, but
No,
avoiding.
but controlling your
Mhm.
dairy. So like I have, like my doctor has me on, a higher protein, a lower fat, which includes the dairy, getting that. So I can have like a serving of dairy, but I'm not going to be drinking, 4 servings of dairy a day. And as far as fruit, probably no more than 2 servings of fruit in a day. But 5 to 7 servings of vegetables.
yeah.
And
So-
and only 1 serving
Right.
of grains
Yeah.
because they are carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes the grains do help. Like oatmeal
Right.
is very good for your health.
Right. Because well, you have to have a certain amount of whole
The
grains.
fibers, yeah.
And the fibers, because that's what, like, we talked about. Your protein is good for you. It's 0 glycemic, but you can't eat just protein. And this is what happened to a lot of people who misunderstood
With
the Atkins diet. They thought they could only eat protein, and they ate a whole bunch of protein, and they wound up in the hospital with all kinds of digestive issues because there wasn't enough fiber to keep their system moving. And so you have to have the fiber to make your system move. And I'm trying to say that in the nice way because,
Right.
But that's what motivates your gut. And that's also what feeds the biome in your gut. You can't just give it a bunch of protein and expect everything to go where it needs to go. So that's where you kind of have to have a balanced diet. And the grains help with that, but you have to choose whole grains. So whole wheat, whole oats, brown rice. And a lot of people have a problem with brown rice because it's a little more chewy than white rice. But white rice, because of the way it has been processed, is really high on the glycemic index. It's almost pure sugar.
So, yeah, the glycemic index of white rice is 72.
Yeah, that's
So,
pretty
although
high.
it's a better choice than a slice of white bread, it's still very high.
That's high.
when
Anything
you
over
compare
70
it
is
to
considered high.
cucumbers at
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
So, when you're going to consider having crackers with ham and cheese or cucumbers with ham and cheese, definitely go for the cucumbers with ham and cheese
Right.
as a healthy alternative
Right.
that can lower, your carbohydrate intake.
Right.
So I think that it's very important to list off your favorite foods or your must-haves, or maybe just take all the foods that you ate for the day and then look at their glycemic index.
Oh, yeah.
As a really good way to understand
what
your
it's
food
doing to your
intake and
body.
what it does. Exactly. Because it's one thing to log all of your food in like MyFitnessPal, for example, or when Weight Watchers, and they say, well, this is 10 points for this meal, but does that have the same like weight? Does it make as much sense as like, yeah, maybe that's a healthier meal because it's only 10 points, but what is that doing to your blood sugar?
For a diabetic. So it's different. Diabetics actually have different nutritional needs.
Mm-hmm.
So even though your MyFitnessPal or whatever is saying, oh, you ate good today, it's not taking into consideration what that effect is on your blood sugar. So yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You have to understand what that is doing to your
Mm-hmm.
body. So
right. And people with diabetes should choose foods with the lower glycemic index, throughout the day. So low GI would be considered things that are 55 or less.
right.
And then, so anything 70 or more is considered high on the glycemic index.
And so you want to avoid those as much as you can. And there are some schools of thought there that, some doctors will tell you can never have those things ever again.
Mm-hmm.
I am not one of those people who believes in absolutes, because the first thing that's going to happen when you tell me I can't eat ice cream ever again, I'm going to start craving ice cream. This is a proven scientific fact that they know that's what happens when you diet, that you're going to crave those things. So not saying, never say never, but knowing what that sugar is, knowing what the glycemic index of that food is, and knowing how to make smart choices in line with that can help you accommodate those cravings when you need to without jeopardizing your health. So if you want to eat something that's a little higher glycemic index, make sure that it's paired with something that is a high fiber, high protein, because that slows down your digestion so that it stays in your body a little bit longer, and it takes it longer for your body to turn that into sugar. So if it takes twice as long to turn it into sugar, then it's going to draw that out, and you will have less sugar in your blood at the same time because it'll just take it longer. Does that make sense? And so that's how you learn to do those things, to accommodate for those things.
Yeah, and if you're wanting to, know more about the glycemic index and like what your favorite foods are, I mean, you can Google. There's so many charts that people have created with the glycemic index.
Verywell Health is a good source for information like that. And they explain more about how the glycemic index works and figuring that out. And it's really interesting to me because back when my sister was first diagnosed as a diabetic, they used to work the diabetic diet on a system of exchange. They called them exchanges. So they categorized, and now we call them macronutrients.
Mm-hmm.
Macronutrients. So we have fats, proteins, and carbohydrates,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those are your three macros. And certain macro combinations are what makes what they called the exchanges. So they had proteins, they had fats, and then they had what they called breads, which is the carbs. So anything that was those. And they would tell you that you could have X number of exchanges per day, and you needed to divide them equally throughout your day. So if you had 3 servings of protein, 3 servings of fat, and 6 servings of breads, as they called it, and it was actually more than that, but then you could look at your diet and everything was categorized by whether it was a protein, a fat.
Kind of like the food pyramid. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So like a glass of milk would be categorized as like maybe a half a protein and a
half a fat
and a carb. And so you would count that off that way, and you knew you had these little things. And so that kind of made it a little easier, but this makes it even easier because just knowing that you need those macronutrients, and you can read labels, because that was the problem my sister had. She had to know what those exchanges were. Like if she was reading a can of soup label, it didn't say what those exchanges were. She had to figure it out. But now that the labeling system is fats, proteins, and carbs, and you can tell what is fiber and what is sugar, you can do those macronutrients. If you know how many macronutrients you should be eating.
Yeah.
Like people who go on the keto diet are supposed to have, what is it, less than 30 in a whole day?
Yeah.
Less than
It's
30
usually
carbs
under
total.
10 in a meal, yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that helps you, okay, so you can have this, but that's all you're going to be able to have.
So you reminded me of something that some people may not know how to do, and you kind of mentioned it, but mathematically, when you're looking at the food label,
right,
and you're thinking, okay, how do I determine if this has a lot of carbs in it or not without
right,
going, is Campbell's soup high on the glycemic index? Because you're not going to see like a score for Campbell's tomato soup, right?
Right.
But if you look at
if you
the
know how to read the
carbohydrates,
labels,
and then you know how to do the quick little mental math that you see there. So if it says that it has 10 carbs and it has 4 fibers, then you subtract the 4 fibers from that to get to the net carbs.
And the net carbs are the sugar carbs.
Right. What's remaining after that. And if you're really lucky and you picked up something that has one of the types of sugars, I know we did some
sugar alcohols,
yeah,
or
we talked
erythritol,
about some of those, xylitol and stuff like that on another podcast. You can subtract those even as well, and it even reduces that number even lower. And that's a really quick way to look at a label and determine, is this going to be high glycemic or low glycemic? Because if that number is like 20 or higher and it doesn't have any fiber in it, then it's just like, it's up there with the white breads. And so like if you're looking at your wheat bread right there, we're looking at a loaf of Nature's Own here.
Yep.
Which is,
let me pull this up. Okay.
Wheat bread is a little bit less on the glycemic index than white bread.
And we're looking, if we're talking about reading labels, you need to learn how to read all of the labels, including the serving size. So that is because everything really is based on the serving size. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have a sandwich. A serving of bread for my sandwich is 2 slices of bread, right?
Yeah.
Wrong.
It's 1 slice.
It's 1 slice of bread is your serving slice.
90 calories?
60. This one has 60
one's
calories.
Only 60, wow.
And this one has 12 grams of carbs.
12
grams of carbs.
One slice of bread.
This is the 100% whole wheat bread, which is the one I prefer.
So I'm gonna write this down. We got 12. Okay.
Okay. And so then the dietary fiber is 2 grams. So that takes it down
to 10.
To 10 grams of sugars.
Does it have any fake sugars?
There are no fake sugars in this one.
All right. So if you're going to have 2 slices, then that's 20 net carbs.
Right. Right there. Yes. But it also has 3 grams of protein because it's whole wheat. So wheat has whole grains also have some trace amounts of protein.
Still in them,
and the proteins help slow it down further and give you some of those other macronutrients. This also has 0.5 grams of fat. So a half a gram of fat. So so this is a much better choice than the white bread, because the white bread generally has no fiber in it at all.
Right, because they've broken down they've bleached the flour and they've broken it down so much.
And they've taken out the wheat germ, so there's no more.
It doesn't have seeds in it.
There's no seed in it. There's no protein. And sometimes they add more sugar to it as well.
So now you're thinking, oh, right, I got this sandwich. What am I going to eat with my sandwich? What's the go-to thing you want to eat with your sandwich?
Potato chips. So I have here a bag of Lay's potato chips.
The most basic potato chips.
Yeah, the plainest one. So we're talking servings of potato chips
150 calories. 140.
You're close. It's 160 for a serving.
Oh, dang.
And you get 15 chips, 28 grams.
15 chips.
Only
Not the whole
15.
bag, huh?
Only
15.
chips.
So I'm telling you, even those little small sandwich bags of.
I just had a whole giant bowl of potato chips the other day. I just poured it in
Yes,
my
because
soup
you just
bowl.
pour it.
No, you have to
And
pre-count
there
it.
was probably about 50 chips in that bowl.
Yeah,
well, I mean, they were
probably.
all broken, so it's kind of hard
Okay.
to measure.
Well, let's
have
start
to
with the
weigh it.
shockers here.
Okay.
This has 10 grams of fat in it.
Yeah, just the
And
fat.
okay,
Yeah.
and we're going back to the reason the fat is important, because
Fat turns into sugar.
fat turns into sugar too. Type 2 diabetics, being obese, being overweight is one of the causes or contributors to type 2
Yeah.
diabetes. So you want to keep your fat content lower,
Right.
to reduce your weight,
Right.
so that you can reverse your diabetes,
Right.
right?
Well, and the triglyceridemia
And
is where you have
Yes.
too much sugar in your blood and it turns it into fat. So if you're already consuming a lot of fat and then the sugar also gets turned into fat, that's just free roaming in your blood. That's what
Right.
that is
Right.
you have too much fat in your blood
right.
because it doesn't have anywhere to go.
Right.
And so then it's wow, you have to reduce the fat content. Okay, so
So then we're into, and I'm not even talking about the sodium. That's a whole different story there. But this actually has 15 grams of fat, of carbs
okay.
in those 15 chips.
Less
so
than
you get a carb of
for each chip is
for
a
each
carb.
is a
Holy
carb.
smokes.
So you ate 50 carbs when you ate 50 chips.
probably. Wow, I'm never eating chips ever again.
I
That's
know
a
they're
lie I
bad
just
for
said.
you. They're bad for you. They do have 1 gram of fiber.
It's actually 1 whole gram. Okay, so we get to take away 1.
So there's 14 grams
okay.
of net carbs in this bag of chips, and there are in this 2 grams of protein.
Okay.
But yeah,
But that's still 14 total net carbs in 1 serving. Well, okay, and that's a family size bag, which by the way, I feel like those bags are really small. How many servings is in there? 7?
13.
13.
13.
I know that
Twice
I didn't.
as many as what you ate.
I know that when I buy that bag, I don't dip into it 13 times. I may be
No.
lucky if I get into it 5 times.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. to
so
think.
that's kind of a shocker, and that
13.
those are not even some of the worst offenders.
What's 14 times 13? Well, 12 times 12 is 144. That's
Yeah.
a lot of
So
carbs.
if you ate that
If you
whole
ate
bag,
that whole bag.
and how many of us have sat there and ate a whole bag of chips?
yeah.
I know, yeah.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right. Okay,
Once
so
upon a time, yeah.
then let's talk about, okay, so this has made your sugar go crazy, crazy, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about normal. We've talked about normal A1C, but we didn't talk about your normal blood glucose level. So most diabetics have to test their blood sugar in some way. The old-fashioned way was to prick your finger, take a little test strip, put some blood on it, and it would tell you what level of blood. So the A1C tests over time, the average, but this is like an instant Polaroid picture of the sugar in your blood. And normal would be anywhere from 70 to 90. It's a little range there, and you want it to stay right in that little range. And now it's going to bump up when you eat something sugary, if you eat something starchy, even with a normal person who does not have diabetes, your blood sugar goes up, it goes down.
But just waking up in the morning makes your
Right.
blood sugar go
Well,
up.
yes. In fact, one of the ways that your body helps wake you up in the morning is that your liver dumps a little bit of sugar into your body to help wake you up. Diabetics sometimes have a problem with it. If they don't eat quick enough, that will be a severe dump of sugar into their system. But so it's a snapshot of what the level of sugar is in your body at any given moment after you've eaten, when you wake up in the morning, whatever. There's also some different ways to do it. Nobody wants to poke their finger with a needle every day, multiple times a day, to check their blood sugar. That's what my sister had to do for years. But nowadays, there's some different ways to monitor it. There are continuous glucose monitoring devices. They're like a little sensor that attaches to your skin, and there's a little filament that goes under your skin that is continuously reading the blood sugar. And they're pretty much painless, and they stay on for like a couple of weeks at a time. Maybe, I don't know how long the other one is. Mine is a Freestyle Libre sensor. It lasts me 2 weeks, 14 days. And then I have either a meter, or I can use my phone to read it.
Travis has a Dexcom, and he wears it about the same amount of time.
Okay. I couldn't remember what the name of that one was. But yeah, so that gives you a snapshot multiple times a day. Some of them read, I think the Dexcom reads continuously, and some of the newer Freestyle Libres also read continuously, and they can even give you an alert if your blood sugar is high or low or whatever. And then that kind of just gives you that picture. So when a diabetic eats a meal, they want to take a blood sugar reading when they take the first bite of their meal. And then 2 hours later, they want to take another reading. And what you're looking at is whether your blood sugar spiked during that time. So a diabetic who is in control, eating the right kind of food, they will have it will go up, but it's not going to spike up and spike back down. It's going to be a nice gentle slope and a nice gentle slope back down. And ideally, you want to be 180 or lower on your blood sugar
After a meal?
2 hours after you ate.
Okay.
So you want to test when you eat, test 2 hours later, and make sure that you're making that nice gentle slope, or that it has dropped at least to 180 by the time that 2 hours has passed. And that's with each meal throughout the day. So that's how you read that. So anything higher than that, 2 hours after your meal, means you ate something, or you started out really high to start with. And you can adjust if you start out before you eat. If you take your blood sugar and your blood sugar is already kind of high, then you know that you need to eat something really low glycemic, maybe
So
heavily protein, so you don't make it worse, and so that you help bring it down more. So that helps a lot, and that kind of informs you what to eat, when to eat it, and things like that. Now, there's also such a thing as low blood sugar, and this is the problem that diabetics have a lot, is that if they have a spike, if their blood sugar goes up really high and then drops rapidly, or it drops below the normal amount, that can make you really sick. So anything below 70 is of concern, and so you would need to eat something that would raise your blood sugar a tiny bit, not a lot. You don't want to go eat a candy bar, but unless you're having a really seriously low blood sugar, and this is mostly with type 1 diabetics. Like my sister would sometimes have a super low, like a 50 or a 40, and she would have to drink a glass of orange juice.
Hypo or hyper?
That is hypo, low blood sugar. Yes. And there are people who have low blood sugars, and that causes problems, and they have to have that controlled diet as well, because what happens is they spike and they drop. So, so you want to make sure that you're not too low. having one that's too high, having one that's too low it can put you in a coma.
Mm-hmm.
So, my sister, I recently learned when she was having low blood sugars, hers were often so low that she would have seizures. And my niece, who was like 10 years old at the time, would have to call 911 to get an ambulance to come take care of her because she did not control her diabetes. And so she would spike out really high and then she would drop really low. And she's lucky that was not what killed her. But but you want to keep your blood sugar in that 70 to 90 range. That's normal. And then when you eat, you want it to go up not too high and come down nice and, not too slow, because you don't want it to go up and stay up, but you want it to not spike so that it doesn't drop really fast. I've heard people who talked about, people who had a high blood sugar and then it dropped 30 points and they felt shaky or whatever. And that is not technically low blood sugar. You do not need to eat when that happens unless it continues to drop. So if it's still within the normal range, it's normal. You don't have to correct that by eating something. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
So that's I've had a lot of people who misunderstand that, and they think that because it dropped they needed to eat something, but it's not just the fact that it dropped, it's how far it drops and whether it dropped below the normal range. So and that's when you would correct it.
So now you were talking about, coma. What are some of the other side effects that we have to worry about?
Part of the reason that we want to control our blood sugars is there's some really serious bad side effects. Sugars in your body, sugar is a crystal. So if you think about crystals, think about, when we talk about
Shard of glass.
Yes, there's sharp edges on it. And so as it goes through your bloodstream, it is scraping the sides of your blood vessels. It is scraping your organs. It goes into your organs and it sits there and just mucks them up really bad. It's an organ destroyer, basically. It gets on your nerves. I love that. It gets on your nerves and it destroys your nerve endings. It scrapes them up and damages them. So people who have long-term uncontrolled diabetes will wind up with all kinds of bad things. And so we talked about the high and low blood sugar. Those are the sudden, immediate effects of low blood sugar.
Yeah.
But this is like long-term use or long-term effects. That damage to your nerves can cause damage to your feet. It causes your body to not heal as quickly. So if you get a scrape on your arm, it's more likely to be infected. It's going to take it twice as long to heal. It causes all kinds of problems. And
I believe sugar actually lowers your immune system response.
It does. It lowers your immune system response. So you're more likely to catch other diseases because your viruses and the bacterias and things are more likely to make you sick. And then when you do get sick, you're going to be sicker longer because it's harder for your body to fight it off. People who have nerve damage in their feet will get sometimes sores in their feet. They'll have numbness and tingling in their feet. They might stub their toe and not realize they've damaged their foot. They will get open wounds on their foot that don't heal. And a lot of people actually wind up having amputations because of that. And that can happen in any of your extremities, including your feet, your hands, your ears, your nose. They're all very all these little small things where there's nerve endings lose that sensitivity, the damage to it. And once that nerve is dead, it is gone. It will, even if you take care of the diabetes, it will never come back. Some of the other places that you get nerve damage are in your stomach lining. So one of the symptoms that my sister had was that the nerves in her stomach damaged her stomach lining was damaged. And so she would have overproduction of stomach acid because of it.
Can cause ulcers.
And it caused ulcers
which
and all
can
kinds
cause
of other
stomach
things.
cancer.
Yes. Well, usually it's viruses that cause the virus causing ulcers causes that. But it causes, I mean, it's painful. It's painful to have those ulcers. It can also slow down your digestive system or cause things like IBS. There's all kinds of problems. It can cause erectile dysfunction because it affects not just your nerves, which affects your erectile function. Nerves are a big, that's the important thing there. And also your blood system. So your kidneys are constantly trying to flush the extra sugar out of your body. And so that's why one of the symptoms of diabetes is frequent urination and dehydration, because no matter how much water you drink, your body is trying to flush all the sugars out of your body. And all of that use is really hard on your kidneys, and it damages your kidneys. And then when your kidneys become damaged, or if your kidneys are over functioning, it can raise your blood pressure, and it could cause damage to your heart. And as I mentioned earlier, all that sugar scraping around in your kidneys, scraping around in your heart.
It makes scar tissue, doesn't it?
It makes scar tissue,
which causes cardiovascular disorders.
So you have all kinds of problems, and it's a vicious cycle, because then when you have the heart issues, that causes further damage to the kidneys. Then the kidney damage causes further damage to the heart, and all those things. So as a result of those things, my sister almost lost one of her feet. She was threatened with an amputation. They were able to salvage her foot, but it was with some very painful, intense reconstructive surgery. And she was in a wheelchair for a couple of years while it healed. And then she also had kidney damage. She lost the function of her kidneys and had to have a kidney transplant. And in the end, she had to have some open heart surgery. During that time, her transplanted kidney failed because of it's a metabolic disease. So any kind of metabolic disease affects your heart, anything with your metabolism, your heart, your pancreas, all of those things are affected. And they all kind of work hand in hand together. And so damage to one causes damage to another. And it's like a cascading system of failures. And that was basically what she had. She had massive organ failures, and she died. So at the age of 50 years old. And at the age of 50 years old, she had already almost lost a foot. She had another major complication, which is retinal detachment. So the nerve damage to your eyes causes the retina and the blood pressure damage also causes the retinas to detach from the back of the eye. And she was legally blind. So she was legally blind. She had a kidney transplant. She almost lost her foot, and she had to have open heart surgery. And then the failure, the metabolic issues post-surgery caused cascading failures, and she died at 50 years old. That is a traumatic, tragic loss because her diabetes was uncontrolled for 40 years of her life.
Because of the poison that we consume in our food.
Sugar is poison.
It is.
It is a poison to our body.
The slow death.
It is the food and the poison. It is both things. Yeah. And it's one of those things where consuming the right amount, if you don't have enough, then you don't have nutrition. If you have too much, it is a poison. But if you can take exactly the right amount, consume the exact right amount, then it is life sustaining.
Yeah. What do they say? Moderation is what?
Moderation is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Moderation is the key. And knowing how to read those labels and knowing what those things mean, knowing what you're looking for, because some people read those food labels and they only look at the sugars. They only look at the line that says sugar, and that's not the telltale of how much sugar is in that. It's the whole, it's
Right.
the carbs
Because again, we don't think about a slice of white bread being
full of sugar. But
sweets.
I wish I knew how
Yeah.
much sugar was in. I don't have any white bread here. We don't eat white bread in my house. We don't eat white rice very often, only if it comes on our sushi already that way, because they are so high glycemic. But yeah, that's the key right there, is just knowing.
So I'm looking at enriched white bread, great value, and it has 13 carbohydrates, so it's only one more carb than the wheat bread, but it has 0 fiber. So when you consider the net carbs
Right.
of a wheat bread sandwich, we calculated that was 20.
Right.
And with a white bread sandwich, it's 26.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just that one choice alone.
That's so
Yeah.
you're eating more carbs, but it's also going to take it long. I mean, it's going to spike your blood sugar out more because it takes longer than the wheat bread. I mean, the
Yeah.
wheat bread takes longer to digest and turn into
Yeah,
sugar.
so it's going to be a gentle wave. If
well-
you were looking at it on the graph of your blood sugar,
a gentle versus
it's
a spike.
gentle versus
But the
spike,
wheat
yeah.
bread, I mean, the wheat bread is still going to raise your blood sugar because
Yeah.
it's on that glycemic index. It's still pretty high.
Right.
But it's not that 100 that you were
Right.
talking about.
Right. So when you think about also, making those choices, like obviously don't do that all or nothing thing where you go, well, I guess I'm just going to eat cucumber for the rest of my life because it's only
No.
15,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't last.
It's not sustaining.
Right.
It's not sustainable.
So if you're currently eating white bread, I strongly suggest you start trying out wheat bread.
What's the one thing you can do to change? And that was kind of what we did. Well, I have always eaten wheat bread because my grandparents always ate wheat bread and I loved wheat bread. But the one thing we switched to was from white rice to brown rice. And it took a little getting used to, but now that's all we eat in my house, brown rice. And it's delicious. And after I stopped eating that sugary white rice, I realized there's so much flavor in brown rice. And you can do anything with brown rice that you can do with white rice once you learn how to cook it. And I, like having a nice rice cooker that knows how to cook white or brown rice is a big help there. But just doing those small changes, switching from sugared Cokes to Diet Cokes or zero Cokes or whatever.
And then at some point, releasing the Cokes, because that's one of the things too. We hadn't really even talked about what the fake sugars do to your brain.
Yeah.
Because they make you crave what it's not getting, because
Right.
they tell your brain that it's getting sweets, but then it's like searching your body's
Right.
like,
And
where's sugar?
sometimes drinking those the artificial sweeteners
Will make your body dump
insulin
because it's
because
looking for
it's
sugars.
tasting the sugar and it's saying, oh, we need some insulin, and that contributes to your insulin resistance, which is what causes the type 2 diabetes. So,
So
or it is
even
one of the
diet
aspects of it.
sugars can also cause
Problems.
diabetes.
We're not meant to eat processed sugars. We're
Yeah.
not. Our bodies were not designed. That is an artificial poison. It's a man-made poison. It really is.
It's like going from a cigarette to an e-cigarette.
Yeah, sometimes it's
really not
worse.
like the better solution.
It's not really a
Right.
better solution.
No,
Yeah.
and that's a different topic for a different time. But I know I'm sure there's a ton of different terminologies and just things that we haven't even touched on.
Right.
I mean,
it's a big important topic. It is.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd love to discuss it more with you if you are interested in this topic or you have questions. We'd love to answer them. We have our MMC chat. It's a Facebook group on our Modern Musings Facebook page. So you go to our Modern Musings Facebook page. There's a link to the chat. We love to chat in there. If people, if you have a question, anybody can post and ask a question. You can get there also from our website, which is www.modernmusings.net. And
and spread the word. I think awareness is really important, and just
there's a lot of diabetics out there who don't understand how diabetes works or how control of your diabetes works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of people out there who know that they have diabetes, and I'm sure there's a lot that are undiagnosed.
Right.
So
they're
did you know that there's according to the CDC, there is 38 million people in the United States with diabetes. That's about almost 12% of the population.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's known
with diabetes. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So
definitely. There are those that have diabetes, like my mom, and refuse to acknowledge it until it was too late.
Right. Because they don't want to make the lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
It's hard, Sugar is addictive. It is the most addictive substance on this earth. It is the most addictive substance on this earth. And it's hard to give up.
Yep. Well, what are we talking about next week?
So we're getting ready for a new year pretty soon. And so, this is the time of year that we start talking about our goals for the next year, planning our word of the year for one little word, things like that. So our next episode is going to be about setting up for the new year.
Awesome.
So that's
great.
It will kind of walk you through what our processes are and some of that stuff, and help you get, maybe if you're
a little head start
on your 2025. So that's what we're talking about.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
Well, if you have any things that we didn't mention about diabetes awareness, and the effects of sugar and et cetera, definitely make sure you hit us up on our chat on Facebook, MMC Chat.
Right.
And you can also see us on our website, modernmusings.net.
Yes.
Definitely.
So catch us there. All right. And then we will see you next week.
Bye.